Hi everyone, welcome to Benjamin's assembly. What we're going to be talking about really is about how we treat each other. No, I'm joking. So I'm Ben, I'm one of the co-founders of the Three Beers, for those of you who don't know me, but that's who I am. I don't really know how to kind of introduce such an incredibly sort of important and sort of game-changing individual as Eric. I've been working in startups since I was 18, that makes it 15 years. What we used to do is we used to build things, and then we would put them out, and then they wouldn't work. And then the VC would say, can we have our money back? And we'd say, no, don't take our money back. Instead, give us some more money, and we'll build another thing, and we think that one will work. And they'd go, okay. And so we spent about £20 million of investment trying to take on Google. And we kept building this product. We kept throwing it out the door, and people kept not using it like they were supposed to use it, and it was very annoying to us. We kept saying to them, why are you not using it in the way you're supposed to use it? So we went through a fantastic process of fighting amongst each other, arguing, and eventually I was introduced to a chap who's ended up becoming my personal mentor called Gabby Kahane, and he brought us all together in this room, and he said, right then, hands up, who in the company uses this product that you've built every single day? And it was just me. And he said, why do you use it? And I said, it's my job to check that it works. He said, would you use it any other day? And I said, no, it doesn't work. He said, right, there's a problem, isn't there? And we looked at ourselves and we said, right, how much money have we got left in the bank? And we had 3 months' money in the bank. So the company died. Many people didn't die, don't worry too much. No one died, but the company died. And then, about 6 years ago, this gentleman decided to introduce our sort of startup minds to some fascinating and interesting concepts. And in the last 5 years, the world has really changed about how we do startups, how we think about startups, how we test for startups. And I think that's really incredible. And a huge amount of that is due to the great work of people who sort of support the lean startup philosophy. And one of the great masters of that is, of course, Eric Ries. So please join me in welcoming Eric to London.
Thank you. That's very kind. Thank you.
So,
hey, what's up?
I don't know. Let's start with you. Let's start here. I think no one wants to hear about me. Let's start with you. So, what's your background? How did you get into sort of startups? Where did you come from? Did you go to college or anything like that? So, just a potted history of Eric.
Sure. My background is as a software engineer. So I was one of those kids in their parents' basement programming computers since I could talk, pretty much. So if you have that very stereotypical image of the kid with no friends, that was me. I couldn't believe, honestly, was shocked to find out that you could get paid for programming. I just thought it was something you did, like breathing. And to me, it was the most fun thing I could think of doing, better than playing video games, better than anything else, programming. So that's what I thought I would do my whole career once I found out it could be a career. And it's just really by coincidence that I happened to be in university when the dot-com bubble hit. So I was in the class of 2000, so I was right there in the middle of it. But I was not in an entrepreneurial powerhouse like Stanford in Palo Alto. I was at Yale University in New Haven, Connecticut. Not exactly a technological innovation zone then or now. So we were like the very last people to get the memo about the dot-com bubble. You couldn't be any later than we were and still have caught it. But anyway, by the time it got to our, part of the world, it was like, hey, I'm a computer science major. I make websites. And I see these magazine stories about people who created a website, and then some investor gave them $10 million, and now they're on the cover of magazines. I was like, cool. That seems better than getting a regular job. So why not? It seemed easy and fun, and all the things that entrepreneurship is not. So that was how I got into entrepreneurship. I tried it and didn't know the first thing about what I was doing. It was a total disaster. The only good news in the story is that because the dot-com bubble ended relatively quickly after we started the company, I couldn't lose that much money because all of the investors who invested in us, all you need to know about them is that they invested in us. So they weren't very good. We were a terrible, terrible investment. I can't believe It's starting to come back, but the way that money flowed in those days is just, it's preposterous. In any event, so I was a very bad entrepreneur, and I was a technology co-founder, and I really believed that if I built it, they would come. And when that didn't happen, here's maybe a way to put it. In the movies, the movies about the plucky protagonist who has a crazy idea that no one believes, and they ask for advice from gray-haired mentors and whatever, and everyone says, don't do it, that'll never work, and they say, screw you, authority figure, I'm gonna go out and do it on my own, and I'll show you, and one day I'll come back. The scene at the end is very cathartic. I'll come back and I'll show you how my thing worked out. So in real life, I want you to visualize, if you haven't had this experience, you have to go back to those people and be like, okay, so you were right. And when you said it wouldn't work and it was a crazy thing to do, you were right, it didn't work. And all the things that you said would come true did, and it's a big failure. So it's depressing. It was not a lot of fun. If you haven't had that experience yet, you have it to look forward to.
And what was the startup that you raised investment for? And what were the lies you told to get the investments?
Oh, we didn't know any. We weren't even smart enough to tell good lies. That's how ignorant we were about entrepreneurship in those days. There were no startup blogs to read. There was no information available at all. There was like books about how to start a small business and write a business plan, which have like the same relationship to becoming an auto mechanic as like playing with a Barbie toy car. Like, none whatsoever, except like very, very surface similarities. So, let me try to pitch you the startup in a good way. We were building a startup that allowed college students from top universities to create online profiles for the purpose of sharing. Does that sound familiar? Oh. That did turn out to be a good idea in the not too distant future from where we were, but unfortunately we had the idea that we wanted to create a real business that would make money. So we turned our technological prowess to the problem of helping college students get jobs. So we had them create their online profiles for a serious purpose, not for sharing with each other. That's a waste of time. But having them share with employers for the purpose of getting jobs. And it would have been a very, I remember writing this business plan. It was like 40 pages long. It was based on US Census data going back to 1890. It was like thoroughly researched. We had several of the people who worked on the spreadsheet that underlies this business plan went on to become masters of the universe on Wall Street, private equity, significant player. This was a serious document. You would read this thing, you would want to weep. It was so beautiful. That's how good it was. And we had it calculated down to very fine detail how valuable our startup would be. And that was just an itsy bitsy tiniest little problem that employers would not pay us for access to the student profiles. So that's kind of an important term in the business model that we were going for. And we just didn't think that was going to be hard. We just thought we'd call up some employers, look up the number for whatever big company X and be like, hi, we're a bunch of students with this startup. You should pay us money for. It was just we had so little understanding of what would actually go into making an enterprise sale. We didn't even know it was called an enterprise sale. That's how bad it was. So yeah, it did not go very well.
Amazing. And so you graduate and you've had this kind of experience, and you're a programmer and from a great school. Where did you go?
There was only one place I wanted to go, which was to Silicon Valley.
Okay.
Because I had been bitten by the entrepreneurial bug. I was very excited to see how the pros do it. So I was like, I'm going to go find the greatest, best startup or tech company I can join. I didn't even know that the two things were different at that time. And I'm going to learn from the masters. And so I wound up joining a company that at the time I joined was 30 employees, had raised, at the time I joined, maybe $25 million already, would go on to raise something like 50 million. It was a very significant Silicon Valley company at that time. And to fast forward a few years and make a long story short, that company also failed for basically the same reasons, but for 2 orders of magnitude more money lost. And it was totally fascinating for me to go from being the founder of a company that failed to being just the most junior engineer, not important person at all, and having this front row seat to this calamity, incredibly expensive calamity, and say, wait a minute, this looks very familiar, but the people I'm working for are the masters of the universe. These are supposed to be the experts who know what they're doing. You read the resumes of the people who are involved with this company, it's incredible, and the talent level in this room was off the charts. The collective enterprise value of startups that have subsequently been founded by people who were part of this experience is in the billions. It was really, every ingredient for startup success was there, except what I would now say is the methodology was all wrong.
And what did this startup do? What was the?
This was a virtual worlds company. So now virtual reality is coming back into vogue, but it's one of these things that goes in and out of vogue. And during this time, it was briefly in vogue.
So this was InView? Is that what
this is the startup before InView.
Right. Okay.
But some of us who were refugees from that company went on to try again. So another 3D avatar product called InView. We started in 2004, and by that point, I was like, all right, well, at least let's try to make some new mistakes, because it's starting to get a little bit repetitive. And my co-founders, I was the young person on the team. My co-founders had been through not 2, but like 3, 4, 5 of these. And you start to see the same pattern over and over again. And I had many friends who, I was in Silicon Valley, so everyone I knew was a founder, everyone was in startups. Everyone was having these same problems over and over again. And so I thought, all right, and in retrospect, I was very lucky that my co-founders were willing to entrust me as the CTO to run the technology team. We started just trying to change the way we built the technology in a different way, a more iterative way, one that was more customer-centric, that would be less expensive, would be less vulnerable to mistakes in the business plan. That was really the way we thought about it. And that approach really worked. Like, we could see the results were really different. I'm happy to talk about it in more detail. But the thing that is hard for people who are coming up in the startup scene now and live in a world where lean startup and other ideas like it are kind of part of the mainstream culture is that we couldn't explain to anybody in Silicon Valley in 2004, 5, and 6 why it worked. Nobody believed us. We had a significant credibility problem. And it was like I was the guy whose job was to survive technical due diligence. Anyone ever had a technical due diligence interview from a VC? Yeah, some of you know what I'm talking about. So a gray-haired industry veteran who's on the, a friend or on the payroll sometimes of the VC comes over. The VC is interested in doing an investment. They've already gotten serious enough to send this person out. And all this person is supposed to do is check a box for the VC that says these people are not technology idiots. And so they would come out, and I was very excited to share with these great, like, listen, everything you know about how to develop technology and you've developed over your many decade-long career is all wrong. And there's a better way, and let me show it to you. Let me show you the evidence firsthand. And I mean, these conversations did not go very well. I was so naive. I thought evidence would matter at all in these conversations, which it did not. And I got to tell you, this is the thing that's hard for people to understand now. We failed the technical due diligence more than once. So like, that would have been a fireable offense. I can't believe my co-founder stuck with me after that. That's like the cardinal sin of being the CTO. But we could see the evidence that it was working. We were way more productive, way faster. Our products were much better than they otherwise would have been. So we became believers in this method that had no name. And it was my job to come up with some way of explaining it to people. Not just the technical due diligence, but investors, new employees as we started to grow and hire. The first day on the job for many technologists who would join us, we would hire some like 10-year veteran out of Yahoo. They would join our team, and we'd be like, okay, on day 1, you're going to push a change to production live. You're going to fix a bug today. And they'd be like, oh, I'd be happy to study the problem today. Like, no, you understand. It's going live today. You're going to learn our entire system, get it loaded up on your computer. You'll have your own sandbox environment. You will learn enough to fix this bug. You will deploy it to production, and customers will benefit from it today. And after they were done having a nervous breakdown, a lot of them would be like, okay, listen, kid, you don't seem to understand how technology works. Let me sit down and condescendingly explain it to you. You need to have a technology requirements document, and some of you may still have familiarity with the waterfall development process. It's quite rigorous in its own way, and it's very ill-suited to startups. And it was rough. Like, I had a lot of years of having to sit down with people and saying, listen, with all due respect, you work for me, so you're going to try it my way first. And if you really don't like it after that, then we can have a conversation about it. But that's what we're going to try. And it was hard, because even people who were like, okay, I get that I have to do it, I still want to know, why does it work? Why? Like, that was a question I could not answer, because I didn't know. I could just see that it did work. Intuitively, it made sense to me. And it was through that process of having to explain this over and over and over again that I started to develop some terminology and that kind of a conceptual framework, just to explain it to myself first, and then ultimately to explain it to other people. I borrowed a lot of concept from lean manufacturing, which is why I call it lean startup. And that's kind of how this all started.
And so where did you sort of find the inspiration? I mean, because I think many people who are not either software practitioners or sort of digital practitioners, especially now, don't know quite how sort of staid and programmatic and sort of dictatorial it used to be when you used to build, here is the scope document, here is our Gantt chart, this is where everything is judged on this very sort of rigorous. What was your sort of insight that you said actually, let's not build anything immediately, let's kind of work out what's going to be needed. Where did you find the inspiration? I mean, do you take a vision quest in the desert? Where did you find the sort of...
It never made sense to me.
Right.
I think I had the luck, like for whatever reason, from the earliest days as an engineer, writing these requirements documents never made sense to me. Because I was like, how do we know that the thing is required? Like, I understand that the laws of physics are required. I got that. But this document says customers want a box with rounded corners and purple edges and this and this and this and this. I'm like, says who? And it's like, well, says so-and-so who wrote the document. I'm like, well, who told them? Like, well, they just know. And I'm like, well, but the last 12 times we did what that person said, customers didn't want it. So why is this one different? And then people would say, well, no, they did want it. It was like doublethink. Like, I don't even remember 1984. Like, in order for the system to work, you have to institutionally misremember what happened in the past over and over again. It was creepy to me. So I was like, well, when it's my turn to design a system like this, we're not going to write these documents that nobody reads and serves no purpose. And we're not going to just take things on faith. We're going to we're going to use some science. So, I mean, today, it is considered obvious in many parts of the world that if you're going to build a product, you should do A/B testing. People know about A/B testing. 50% of the customers see one version, 50%. When I first started using A/B testing myself, it was considered a direct marketing technique. The idea that you would apply it to engineering was heresy. So much so that I had to write the A/B testing framework myself with my bare hands because there weren't any.
Yeah.
And when I tried to get my fellow coders to use it, they're like, why? What is the point? And it was like, it's so obvious now. It's like, and I was kind of like, well, because science, right? And they're like, well, but this isn't science, this is business. I was like, okay, now I think I've got to the root of a problem. Because like normally in most parts of the world, like astrology, people still do it, but it doesn't have the same kind of cachet, and it's not used to make multi-million-dollar decisions, I hope. And I was like, but why? What business is straight up astrology? You predict the future, and then you make it happen through force of will, determination, energy, and mental processes. I mean, that's not science. That's ridiculous. I was like, you should be committed if you think you can predict the future. Not, you should be rewarded. That seemed crazy to me. So that was always my point of view. I was always the very irritating person in every organization I've worked in, agitating for a more customer-centric, faster process. But it wasn't really until I got a chance to put some of these ideas into practice in InView that I started to confront the much more difficult problems. Just like, okay, hotshot, you say everything should be data-driven. So, I think if we put up we make our ads out of pornography, then we'll have our data will go up and to the right. So are you saying we should do that? And now I think I know the answer to that question, but I didn't then. And 100 other questions about wait a minute, I thought entrepreneurship was about vision and we're supposed to be creating something big, and this is all about incrementalism, and it's about kind of lowest common denominator thinking and spreadsheet, all kinds of confrontations that I didn't know how to resolve. That was the laboratory that I forged these ideas in, and had to find something that first made sense to me and then that I could explain to other people. Lean manufacturing was not the first attempt. I have piles and piles of conceptual frameworks I tried first before I resorted to a manufacturing metaphor that were even worse. So as bad as you think those of you that know there's always a lean skeptic in these rooms, I'm sick and tired of lean startup. You should have called it something else. You should have this. Believe me, I tried, and if you have a better idea, I would be glad to follow you. I swear. It's just the best I could do.
It sounds to me that there's some really interesting sort of psychological concepts that as well as being supported by logic are quite actually fundamental in terms of the
Sure.
sort of entrepreneurial mindset, the mistakes that we make. Pivot is a really interesting concept. I meet a lot of wonderful, fascinating entrepreneurs, through the work with the beards, and I encounter people who they were doing a dating app, and now they're doing a home renting app, and they say to me they've pivoted.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem like they've pivoted at all, because the vision surely cannot have been shared. But
Right.
yet, somehow,
Sure.
we started using pivot, meaning we gave up, or we actually decided to do something else.
There's also the people that pivot every day. It's like, you can't pivot that quickly. It's impossible. It's just, you're just using pivot to mean change, give it up.
Yes.
We had Mark Andreessen at the Lean Startup Conference a couple of years ago, and he said, we have this problem now of people who've let failure go to their heads. It's like, people have sometimes do forget that our goal is to succeed, after all. Someone should mention that, especially for the poor investors who are bearing with the very expensive failures that they're having. But I try to be humble about this because from the outside, a lot of famous pivots, it's kind of hard to see the thread of what connected the two things unless you were there.
Okay.
So, my feeling is if the founders feel like there's some continuity, then like that's good enough for me. So you think about, Groupon. It's a pretty famous pivot, right? They started out as this collective action kind of petition site called The Point. And the idea was we would, if 100 people all agree to go protest City Hall on a certain day, then we would do it. But if only 80 people want to do it, it wouldn't tip, it wouldn't happen. So the people were like, well, that's just a restart to coupons and, nail salons or whatever. There's no continuity. But not the founders who were there. They felt like they took what they had learned and the difficulty of doing The Point and were able to translate that into something that still felt like it was mission aligned for them. And here's the cool part. Anyone know what the very first Groupon was? Pizza. So yeah, somebody knows. So there's a pizza restaurant in the building of the Groupon headquarters. So this is literally the closest small business they could possibly have gone to. They knew the proprietor because they ate pizza there all the time.
So it's not even getting out of the building, it's just in the same building.
Yeah, they just went downstairs. And they had this idea, they're like, oh, maybe we do this coupon thing. So The Point, they had spent $1 million in a year building this very complicated website that nobody used. And they're like, well, let's not do that again. And they decided they would do this pizza thing. So they created this, they took WordPress. There was no WP engine in those days, but they probably would have been hosted on WP engine.
Sorry, just correct you, W Penguin.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, W Penguin, yes, that. They created a simple web page. It was like, hey, 2-for-1 pizza at this pizza restaurant. If you blah, 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 all the rules and conditions, click here. They set it up. It was very, very simple. Everybody who bought the coupon, they literally were sitting on their laptop in Apple Mail, formatting fake coupons that they were emailing to the customers one at a time. And I don't remember now the numbers. I think actually this is the numbers are in my book. I just don't remember what they are. It's been a while. But they sold something like 40 pizzas. Now I know if you were there and sitting with them, you would have been like, 40 pizzas? This is $1 billion company for sure. For sure. I mean, I wouldn't have figured it out. I'm not that smart, but I'm sure you would have. It's so obvious. But this is the thing about pivots that's so critical. Because they'd had the failure with The Point, they could get excited about 40 pizzas. Because they had just spent a year getting everybody to do nothing. The idea to get 40 people to do anything at all was they knew how hard that was. And they were like, this is pretty exciting. And I'm sure they weren't billion-dollar opportunity, but well, better than the shit we were doing before. So let's try t-shirts and and they were trying a couple more things. And as they were hey, this is a more productive avenue of inquiry for us than what we were doing before. So let's try it. And you see that pattern a lot with pivots that the insight that was learned, I talk about vision, strategy, and product in this higher, that's very theory-oriented, but actual practicing startups often don't talk or think that way. They just live the difference, where they say, okay, we really learned something important here, and we still think that it's worth going forward, but we gotta kind of do this other thing, and maybe from the outside it seems strange, but it makes sense to us. That's good enough for me.
And how do we, because again, dealing with sort of large organizations, the sort of natural, as I've gone through this process myself over the last sort of 5 years recently, I kind of believed if I just sort of taught people that Lean Startup existed and Ruby on Rails existed and you could basically tweet at people and find out if people wanted stuff, that would solve the problem.
Sure it would.
And as you kind of go through sort of actually dealing with these people, you realize they're doing this and that they're not idiots, and actually it's oh, okay, what is it do we think about the sort of psychology of either the business training that people are receiving, or the sort of awareness that they have? Because it seems to me that many people are very limited in their worldview in terms of the things they experience, very limited in their education, and often I feel it comes from a fear of not knowing other things. I wonder how do we sort of, if we could create the ultimate MBA for executives or for managers, what would we do differently these days? It's much more 21st century.
This is not a hypothetical question for me. I have been engaged by several schools to answer this question, and I'll just give you one example that I think is going to have a big impact on the world ultimately. The Harvard Business School, you guys are familiar? The producers of, by volume, maybe the most arrogant graduates, ever. I don't mean that, I don't know.
Cambridge and Oxford is pretty good at that.
I see. Okay, yeah, maybe you guys have give them a run for their money. I mean, and listen, many of my best friends are MBAs, so don't get me wrong. But especially, increasingly, I think there's a recognition that MBA is not necessarily the best three letters to have following your name in the startup world. But there was a time when it was considered the gold standard. credential you could have in the business world. And they have been teaching entrepreneurship there for a lot of years, and their entrepreneurship curriculum had a lot of good things going for it. But one of the basic problems is that all learning at Harvard Business School up until very recently was done by the case method. So any of you ever read a Harvard Business School case or like official business school case? It was a very bizarre experience. I had one written about me at a certain point. I was like, whoa,
That's weird.
this is very weird thing to have happen. First of all, a lot of times during the interview process, the case writer would say, explain to me what the situation was. I'd be like, well, we had this dilemma, we had to do X or Y, and they'd be like, could we make it a little bit more ambiguous? I'm like, well, no, that's what actually happened. They're like, I know, but for the case, do you mind if we change it to be a different problem? I'm like, well, no, because then what people learn from this hypothetical, like, yeah, but if you do it that way, it's too obvious what the right answer is. And I'm like, it wasn't obvious what the right answer was. It was really effing hard. But of course, the problem, and it's not a knock on the case method, it's just a fundamental problem that everything is obvious once you know the answer. So when we used to teach case about InView, we would go into Stanford Business School and Harvard, teach this case, and the MBAs, once you kind of lay it out for them what the situation was, they'd be like, obvious, I can't believe you had to pivot. You guys suck. They just look at you like you're so stupid. And I'm like, I know, if you were there, I'm sure you would have made the right decision. I'm the stupid one, totally. But that's how it is. I mean, read any story of any business. I defy you to really viscerally have that experience of being like, this is a smart person who went wrong. Maybe I would have gotten wrong. It's just impossible. You'd be like, I can't believe it. My favorite of these stories, if you'll indulge me, has anyone ever read a biography of Howard Schultz and Starbucks? I love a Starbucks story because there's this moment you read any book about Starbucks, this is a fact. Today we take it for granted that Starbucks serves you coffee in a paper cup to go, right? But for many years, Starbucks did not do that. They only sold coffee equipment to make coffee at home because that is the only way to get the perfectly correctly brewed espresso thing. So Howard Schultz was the rebel trying to convince the other Starbucks founders that they should serve coffee in a store and let people take it to go. And he was so unsuccessful in convincing them that he had to quit and start his own separate company to prove that this was a good idea, which he called Il Giornale, because he wanted it to be the real Italian espresso experience. And he built a store in Seattle with the tuxedoed waiters and Italian opera and Italian newspapers. And you could not get the coffee in a paper cup. You could only get it in a porcelain cup and drink it there, because although it is not the perfect experience if we can get it home, at least it will be in a porcelain cup. And it was only through massive amounts of customer feedback, of people yelling at him in the store, that he eventually relented. You could just go through the story. Each of the elements of Il Giornale, starts to become closer to what we know. And eventually they were like, okay, I guess if you specially ask, we will give you a paper cup and we'll let you take it to go. I mean, like, this is like one of the genius entrepreneurs of our time. It had to be painstakingly, And my favorite moment is, anyway, through a long story short, he winds up giving the opportunity to buy the Starbucks brand back from the original Starbucks founders, and what was originally Starbucks became Peet's Coffee in San Francisco. It's an extremely confusing story. In any event, there's a company meeting. This is my favorite. They have a company meeting where they have to now decide for this new company that they're going to now expand to multiple geographies. Should it be called Starbucks, or should they continue to use the name Il Giornale? And it's just like, they had to have a meeting about it. I can't believe. You're like, what an idiot. I mean, we all know that Starbucks is like, one of the biggest companies in the world, one of the most unbelievable success stories, a symbol of American colonial oppression to so many people now. Like, it's like that's successful. And like, they almost shot themselves in the foot because they couldn't see. But like, it's only obvious now because we see a Starbucks on every, come to San Francisco, you trip over a Starbucks in every block practically. So we just take it as obvious. Of course it was going to work out, but like the evidence is there that it just wasn't clear at the time. So that kind of fog of uncertainty is what plagues all case method. Everything is obvious in retrospect. So, I spent some time with some of the folks at Harvard. I'm a very minor player in this story. I just happened to be there to help them make this transformation. They decided that they're going to change the curriculum. This happened a couple years ago. Not only are they going to teach Lean Startup, which of course is the part that I was very excited about, but they're going to make the students put Lean Startup into practice by actually running and operating a business in order to get your degree from the Harvard Business School.
Wow.
Now, I was kind of like, wait, they don't have to do that? Like, I assume you go to business school, you learn how to run a business, right? Like, no, you read cases about other people who ran a business. Like, that's those of you running a business right now, it's very different in the books and the magazines. Like, reading about it, it just isn't the same as actually doing the thing itself. So forcing the students to actually build, and they have like, they do a lot of this stuff in simulation, and they actually like allow them to invest in other students' companies, and they have like a whole like exchange of the stuff, just basically to help them all realize they're not as smart as they thought. And that's, I think, been a very positive change for the school. To me, it's going to help the entrepreneurs who go to, the future entrepreneurs at HBS. I've met a lot of them, actually, are very cool. They are not that kind of stereotype of the MBA because they understand, because we're living in an entrepreneurial time, that they need to, adapt to these new conditions. So that's fine. They're going to be great. But the people it's going to have a really positive impact on, I think of, are all the other elements of the ecosystem where MBAs still hold sway. Like, who becomes the leaders of the entrepreneurial ecosystem tends to be the people who made a lot of money as entrepreneurs. Now, some of them are the Howard Schultz who took a company public and they did that thing, but a lot of the others are people who sold their company to a big dumb company. And like, who made those purchase decisions? Like, who do we anoint? Who do we trust to anoint the leaders of our community? It's like the corp dev people at AOL. Like, I don't mean to pick on AOL in particular, but like, pick your favorite big company. Like, are those actually, did they know what they're talking about? Like, not necessarily. So like, you think about the policymakers and the investors, the private equity folks, the lawyers, like all the other parts of the ecosystem. A lot of those people went to these business schools, went through this curriculum, and for them to actually have had a firsthand experience of entrepreneurship, even if they never do another entrepreneurial thing in their whole life, I think it's going to have very positive effects in the world.
Interesting. I was also reading the Howard Schultz book, and there's this kind of, there's like this wonderful sort of bookend to the story of how hard he found getting started. And I think he's in Italy somewhere, and he finds this little piazza somewhere, and this guy brings in this incredible espresso, and he's being the sort of chap that he is, he's thinking, where does these beans come from? What is the machine this guy's using? What is like his secret sauce? And he goes and he says, I'd like to speak to the owner. There's some noise in that sort of Italian manner that one can sort of, imagine. And then eventually this old chap appears. He's like 80, and he's, what do you want? And he's like, I want to talk to you about your coffee business. And he's like, okay, like, give me 20 minutes, right? And he's like, this American, he's come here talking to me about coffee. What an idiot. He comes out, and eventually they sit down, he brings out his espresso, and he says, I want to talk to you about your shop, what's special about it. I really like the attitude you have. And this guy's like, how many coffee shops do you own? And he turns around and says, whatever the ludicrously large 375,000 is. And apparently the old man just falls off his chair. And it's just this kind of wonderful moment of this realization that we're always learning from everyone, from big and from small. And it's not this, I remember, my co-founders will tell you how fucking difficult I am to work with, and Mark will as well. I'm really good at like 0 to 1, and I really believe in little and agile and small and fast and quick, and don't fucking plan it and just do it and move it, and But I'm awful at 1 to 1,000. Right. Like, if you want me to get something up and off the ground and make it happen, I can do it. You want me to keep that running? That's just not me. Right. And I think as you kind of go through the process of testing things and fucking stuff up and getting it wrong, you learn this. And I wonder, it sounds like you're more of a sort of 1 to 1,000 sort of person, where you're so much more interested in the process. Or do you still get excited by throwing something up and out?
I feel like I get excited about both. I do some things that are scaling, like my work in Lean Startup, and the businesses that I run around that, are way past product market fit and have grown quite large. And then I also have some crazy, wacky stuff that I like to work on, just that everyone still thinks is a bad idea. Just to keep myself grounded in that experience, because I get bored otherwise. What I think is necessary for modern companies, if you want to build a truly modern company, you have to have operational excellence at both things. You have to be able to create new things and scale them successfully. And you have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. It's two capabilities. And people who say that that's impossible or too hard, I'm like, look at the history of how companies were run. Like, companies used to only do, engineering or marketing, but now they do both. And like, they didn't used to do finance and accounting and IT. And our modern companies are amazing. You compare them to companies of 100 years ago, the technological sophistication, not just of the software and the mechanics, but the organizational process. I mean, the global supply chains we run now, are unparalleled in history. So we are very good at that. So we just need to add another tool to that toolbox, another skill that we develop as a kind of core competency of a modern company. It just so happens that this one will have a profound humanizing influence on the companies that adopt it, because working at a company that has entrepreneurship as a core discipline is just a lot more fun than those big dumb alternatives.
Okay, it's time for you guys to ask questions. I'm going to make a few rules. Don't pitch him, you bastards.
Don't pitch me, bro.
No pitching.
So my question is, how do you deal with technical debt when doing lean projects? When do you refactor? How do you, get things back on track?
I love this question. It's one of my favorite questions. Everyone knows what technical debt is? Okay. So this is in the engineering world. This is a metaphor that is used to debate quality of products. And the idea is that if you cut corners and you build things in a sloppy way, it's like you're borrowing money. You're going to have to pay it back. So you think you're done with your project, but you've kind of rickety foundation that is going to demand future maintenance. And it's a very useful metaphor because some pointy-haired boss, MBA person came in and said, build this thing for me. I'm going to tell you how much time it should take, how much quality you should have, and how much money it will cost. And you're like, that's impossible. You can pick 2 out of the 3. And of course they're like, well, I only have so much money and it has to be done on Thursday. So you're like, okay, I'm going to cut some corners, but listen, you realize that's like we're taking out a loan and we're going to have to pay it back. And the MBA is like, yeah, whatever. But you at least feel like your ass is covered for when they come back to you and say, why did the bridge fall over? You're like, I told you it would be full of technical debt. It's not as effective a tool as it's supposed to be. For those of you who've ever had these negotiations, it's quite dangerous. Now, here's the trick. I wrote this very controversial article that got me in trouble in engineering schools. It was called Embrace Technical Debt. And here's my claim. If you're in a startup situation, technical debt is your friend, not your enemy. Why? In the real world, if you borrow money from someone, you're going to have to pay it back. But let's say you borrow money from someone and they go bankrupt first. And they disappear off the face of the earth and you never heard from them again. You just got free money. Now, in the startup world, that happens all the time. Now, in the finance world, it's quite rare. But in the startup world, it happens all the time. You cut corners to get a quick version of a product out there, and you're like, oh, God, I'm going to have to do all this deferred maintenance. But then nobody uses it. And you throw it away. You're like, well, I'm sure glad I didn't do all that deferred maintenance, because who cares? So now, someone's like, but hold on, but what about when I think thing succeeds and I'm all this deferred maintenance? First of all, wouldn't that be nice? Your thing succeeds and now you have some maintenance to do, that's a lot better than you didn't succeed at all, right? So first of all, that's a success problem that you should be grateful to have. And second of all, the reason technical debt is a problem is that people use it to invest in more features. So basically you borrow money and you blow it on consumption instead of on infrastructure. But if you use the money that you borrow, the technical debt that you borrow, to invest in tools and processes that help you do refactoring, deployment, and testing quicker, then those are investments in infrastructure that pay off whether the feature was good or not. So, for example, if you invest in continuous deployment infrastructure so that you can get tests out as fast as you can write them, then whatever thing actually turns out to be good, your deferred maintenance will be less expensive when you have to invest in it. So I know it was kind of a technical conversation, but that is the way to deal with technical debt in a startup. Still means refactoring is very valuable, still believe in unit tests, still believe in continuous integration, but you got to balance against the risk that the thing will never happen. And the same logic applies to experimentation, like doing A/B tests and stuff in your code. It's the same logic to do that as continuous integration. So people who are like, oh, I'm all agile, I have continuous integration and complete test coverage, but they have no experiments, they don't impress me much.
Yeah. So kind of, I suppose, to translate for some of the non-technical people, what you're talking about is it's as idiotic to not invest in the potential for growth and for testing as it is to be so massively concerned about whether you're making the right technical decision now.
That's right.
Okay, awesome. There's a fantastic sort of a question. I always like anonymous. Anonymous.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
always ask
My
the
friend's
great
startup has
questions.
a real issue. I understand.
Does @Ries not get bored of evangelizing? Will he do another tech startup?
Well, that's several questions combined into one.
Just 2.
But see, there's a lot more to it. Okay, first of all, there's the assumption that I would get bored evangelizing. First of all, if you're the kind of person that I am, do people really get tired of the sound of their own voice? I don't know. I certainly don't. So I think this is a blast. I love doing this. It's amazing. The fact that anybody wants to listen to me at all is I consider miraculous and probably going to end any minute, so I enjoy it as much as possible until that day. So awesome. So no, I do not get bored. Secondly, even if I get bored with saying the same thing over again, I get renewed energy from the incredible variety of people I get to meet doing this. So I get to meet entrepreneurs doing all kinds of crazy stuff. I'll just tell you one quick story. I did a trip 5 years ago to New Zealand. which to me was like truly the middle of nowhere. Like, could barely find it on a map.
Middle Earth of nowhere.
Yeah, Middle Earth of nowhere. That's a better line. I mean, a beautiful country. I had a wonderful time there, and I got to meet all these like local entrepreneurs in New Zealand working on all the craziest, wackiest stuff. There's literally a team that was working on building a jetpack. Not like a metaphorical jet, an actual, honest to God.
They're late.
What's that?
They're late.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's like, oh, where's my jetpack already? Like, they've been working on it for like 20 years. I just saw the other day that they're going public. I thought this was no chance would possibly. It's a jetpack. Are you kidding me? Going, well, I saw this great startup that just launched on Kickstarter, actually called the Yike Bike, which is like a tiny. I can't even explain it to you. It's like a crazy mechanical device. You check it out, the Yike Bike. So I get to meet like truly wacky, amazing entrepreneurs like all over the globe. People that if I had just stayed in my engineering career, I never would have gotten to meet. So that's just that's awesome. Will I do another startup? I am always doing another startup. I can't resist it. So yes, I am.
So no and yes was the answer.
Yeah. I could have just said that, I guess.
No. It's very helpful for us if you do long.
Use more
Yeah,
words.
that's kind of
Okay,
the
yeah.
purpose of this whole thing.
Okay.
Who else? Any more for any more?
Hello.
Hi.
Hey, so I'm Nick. I'm from a company called I'm In. We're a B2B. So my question is a couple of things. It's related to the top question on there, actually, which is great because a lot of people have voted for it. So for people who are doing a B2B, not a B2C,
Yeah.
and for situations where they might be an API business or a business that's quite technical, right? So the API economy is pretty big now.
Yeah.
Is the lean startup, is that whole thing still possible? Can you with a small number of customers, say like 10 B2B customers, and like a really powerful API, can you still do lean, or is that just...
No, you're right. You found the one case that lean doesn't apply to.
Great.
Yeah, never mind. I guess this is futile. Come on, man. What do you expect? Just even if it's true, but what do you really expect me to say? No, I appreciate the question. It's just the way that you phrased it, and it just got on the heels of this other question. Look, you're going to have to think for yourselves. I don't mean to be a jerk about it, but the fact that I say lean applies to something doesn't make it so. And the fact that I can tell you a story, like take a company like Twilio that's built a really great business. They're going to go IPO in the next 2 years. In a telecom space, entirely on an API-based strategy. They like classic lean startup, a lot of good lean startup stuff. So like, it can be done, but like, I say it can be done, but what good does that do you? The real question needs to be, okay, so in my very specific business, not B2B in general, not API in general, but my specific business, what really has to be true for me to know that this is going to work? What do I really have to learn? And that's the answer to your question. So, can it be done with 10 companies? I want to know, can it be done with one? Like, can you provide enough value to one customer to be like, okay, I feel like, it's not a statistically significant sample, but at least it's something. Now let's scale it up. And when you really start to ask that question, it's like, okay, if I have a product that has 5,000 APIs to be valuable, how much less valuable is it with 4,999? And anybody who tells you like zero, it's 0 to 1. You get 5,000 APIs is valuable with 4,999. It's not. It's like, come on, that's not true. There's some kind of curve that says as you add more APIs, the value increases. Well, if the value increases from 0 APIs to 1, that should be detectable. So since you have to build the APIs in order anyway, you have to pass through the phase when you only have 3 APIs. Why not test that with customers? Why not? May as well check. And if the customer's like, I can't believe you're so stupid that you don't have this other API, you can check, hey, is that one on our product roadmap? And if it is, good for you, you're a genius. But if it's not, if that happens even one time, you're like, that actually, we weren't planning to do that. Then you're like, well, gosh, I'm sure glad I asked. It's that simple.
Okay, that little very poorly coded messages there was the time to say thank you to Eric.
Oh, thank you very much.
So I think that's been one of the most educational and hard-hitting and sort of knowledgeable Tudor Facts that we've had. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Maybe not the funnest, but I got your humour. I think they missed a lot of jokes. They missed
Thank
a
you.
lot of
I
great
know.
jokes.
Come on, guys.
I didn't know whether I should go with but anyway, these people. I think there was a reverence in the room. They're like, everything is amazing.
Oh, that's terrible. Yeah.
I know.
Yeah, I'm sorry to
It's because we hung out before, I think. Please get it up for one of the driest sense of humours we've had on Chew the Fat that most of you missed, and also one of the smartest people in this scene currently, but don't believe him. Eric.
Thank you so much. Really a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.